Hey everybody, we are going to start the lymphatic system in this video. And the lymphatic system has two basic groups of components. There's one group of components that is involved in the return of interstitial fluid to the blood. And the components of that part of the lymphatic system are this liquid called lymph, and this is a liquid that was once interstitial fluid. And not only is there this liquid that says used to be ISF, not only is there this liquid, there are also vessels to carry this liquid called lymphatic vessels. So that is one group of lymphatic structures and its job. Now, we also have a variety of tissues and organs. There's different types of lymphatic tissues, as well as four major lymphatic organs, including lymph nodes, tonsils, spleen, and the thymus. And all of these guys function in some manner of immune defense. So we're going to go over lymph and lymphatic vessels and interstitial fluid return first. Then we'll deal with these organs, this tissue, and what roles they play in immune defense. So let's get to it. All right, this is a blood capillary here. We know that every time blood goes into a capillary, the hydrostatic pressure of the blood pushes water out. Most of that water is reabsorbed due to the osmotic pressure of blood, but not all of it. And there's this little tiny amount of excess interstitial fluid that results. And when you think about the fact that we've got billions of capillaries, that little tiny amount of excess interstitial fluid adds up. And luckily, we're going to have lymphatic vessels, so this green guy right here, they're going to take that small amount of fluid and eventually return it to the blood, so it does not build up in our tissue spaces. So once the excess interstitial fluid is in the lymphatic vessel, it is called lymph. The word lymph means clear fluid, and the lymphatic vessels take that clear fluid back to the bloodstream. All right, so here we see a diagram of lymphatic vessels. The green guys, they are going to pick up excess tissue fluid. So basically we've got them generally wherever we've got blood capillaries, so whether that's systemic or pulmonary, and then lymphatic vessels take that lymph back to your blood, emptying into the venous system, usually near where the internal jugular vein meets the subclavian vein to make the brachiocephalic vein. So why end in veins? Because veins are low pressure, and it's easy to add liquid to a low pressure system. Okay, there are four basic types of lymphatic vessels. So the first ones, the ones that pick up the lymph, are called lymphatic capillaries. They pass lymph on to lymphatic collecting vessels, which pass lymph on to lymphatic trunks, which pass lymph on to lymphatic ducts. This is our order of flow, and we know when we have the order of flow, we also have the order of pressure. So our highest pressure would be right here, our lowest pressure would be down here. All right, we're going to look at all of these types of lymphatic vessels, starting with lymphatic capillaries. So these green tubes here represent lymphatic capillaries. Lymphatic capillaries are almost always going to be near blood capillaries. So here's a blood capillary. We know that plasma in the blood capillary is pushed out. That plasma is then going to become interstitial fluid. Any excess interstitial fluid is going to be pushed into the lymphatic capillary, and it is then referred to as lymph. Now notice that a lymphatic capillary has just a single tunic. Which tunic is that? It is a tunica interna. You can see the simple squamous epithelium there. This is good because it's nice and permeable, easy for the fluid to get in. We see a lymphocyte who also got in. Lymphocytes use the lymph to travel around. Think about the name lymphocyte. You can see where it came from. And one of the downsides of the permeability of these lymphatic capillaries is that pathogens and cancer cells can get in here as well and use the system to travel. So these are lymphatic capillaries. Lymphatic capillaries are going to fuse together to eventually make larger lymphatic vessels. All right. Now we've got lymphatic capillaries pretty much everywhere we have blood capillaries. One big exception is what is pictured here. This is red bone marrow. This is red bone marrow as well. And we do not have lymphatic capillaries there. So everywhere we've got blood capillaries, but just not in red bone marrow. Now we actually have a special type of lymphatic capillary found in the villi of the small intestine. So the small intestine's lining is not a straight line. The small intestine's lining goes up and down and up and down and up and down to give it more surface area. And these up and down structures, each of them is a villus. Collectively, they are called villi. Now, the villi, why do we have them? We have them to increase surface area. Surface area is going to be better for what? It is going to be better for absorption. Better for absorption. Now, inside a villus, notice I've got blood capillaries to absorb nutrients, but I've also got a special lymphatic capillary, this green guy right here, this clear area right here. And the special lymphatic capillary in a villus is called a lacteal. And the purpose of a lacteal is to absorb dietary fat. And the fatty lymph in a lacteal has its own name. The fatty lymph in a lacteal is called chyle. Okay. So those are a special type of lymphatic capillary. We have lymphatic capillary everywhere. We've got blood capillaries. We're going to have lymphatic capillaries to pick up interstitial fluid. The exception was in the red bone marrow. And then we've got some special lymphatic capillaries, which are known as lacteals. We find them in the villi in our small intestine, where they play a role in absorbing fat from our diet. And the fatty lymph that ends up in here is referred to as chyle. Don't say chyle. Now, you are probably wondering, why do we make this chyle, this fatty lymph? If we're putting most nutrients into blood capillaries, why does the dietary fat need to go into the lacteal? Well, the answer lies in how the dietary fat is packaged. So when you break down fat, you then turn them into these spherical structures. The fatty acids are turned into these spherical structures called chylomicrons. And these guys are too big to get into the blood vessels. So they're able to enter the lacteal. The lacteal is able to accommodate these guys. One of the consequences of this is the fact that the fat is not going to go to the liver the way other nutrients do. The fat ends up going to the general circulation. All right, on that note, we're done with these special capillaries, the lacteals. Now, from lymphatic capillaries, we go into lymphatic collecting vessels. And we see a bunch of these green lines here. These represent the lymphatic collecting vessels. They're very similar to veins in terms of their structure. Now, one very important thing to note is that as lymphatic collecting vessels are carrying lymph back towards the shoulder and neck area, so we're going in this direction, all the lymphatic flow is going this way. As they do so, lymph is going to be passed through lymph nodes. What do you think the lymph nodes do to the lymph? Well, they are going to filter the lymph. They're going to look for pathogens, bacteria, viruses, cancer cells, that sort of thing. So this is a crucial role that the lymphatic collecting vessels and the lymph nodes are playing. If we were to look at a lymphatic collecting vessel, this is the lumen of it. This is the wall of it right here. Notice how thin that wall is. Very thin wall, reminiscent of a vein. Thin wall because pressure is low. And this thing right here, you see these two flaps right here? These two flaps are a valve. And lymphatic collecting vessels need valves because they're low pressure. Just like veins needed valves because they're low pressure. Now, from the lymphatic collecting vessels, we're going to empty into lymphatic trunks. And we've got 5 basic lymphatic trunks. There are jugular trunks, subclavian trunks, bronchomediastinal trunks. Then there's also going to be lumbar and intestinal trunks. All right, so jugular trunks are going to be found in the neck. These are bigger vessels, bigger lymphatic vessels. Subclavian trunks are going to be coming from the arms. Bronchomediastinal trunks are going to be coming in from the chest and lung area. There's one right there as well. And then lumbar trunks are coming from think like the lower back and the legs, and intestinal trunks from the abdomen. So my 5 trunks, my jugular, bronchomediastinal, intestinal, lumbar, and subclavian. And those trunks are going to empty into a pair of ducts. So right here, I see the right lymphatic duct. That is the right lymphatic duct, that little guy right there. He's being formed by the jugular trunk, the subclavian trunk, and the bronchomediastinal trunk on the right. I also have a thoracic duct. The thoracic duct starts down here and then goes up kind of behind the heart, behind the esophagus, between the lungs. It goes up, 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 up. It curves around and then empties right there. Notice how both these guys are emptying into my veins where my internal jugular and my subclavian vein meet. So my thoracic duct is getting my lumbar and intestinal trunks right by the diaphragm. Then my thoracic duct comes up, curves, and as it does so, it receives the bronchomediastinal trunk and the jugular and subclavian trunk on the left. Notice how long the thoracic duct is compared to this tiny, short, little right lymphatic duct. I'm just covering up the whole right lymphatic duct with that tiny blue line right there. So very different sizes here. And they also differ in the regions of the body they are draining. So the right lymphatic duct is draining the right head, right neck, right arm, and right torso above the diaphragm. The thoracic duct is draining everything similarly on the left side, but also everything below the diaphragm, basically. abdomen, pelvis, and both legs. So very asymmetrical there. Okay, so there's no good reason why we have this asymmetry here. It's just a quirk of the way the lymphatic system develops in the embryo. Okay, here I see a nice model. I wish we had this model in the lab. Here is the internal jugular vein on the right. Here is the subclavian vein on the right. And I see my thoracic duct coming up right here. There is the thoracic duct coming up right there. All right, it would have started out down lower. I think if I move that, we can see a little more. Anyway, right here, I've got my right lymphatic duct. So we've got subclavian, we've got jugular coming together. I don't see there's the bronchomediastinal too. Now, what I really like about this model is I can see how the lymphatic collecting vessels have all of these lymph nodes that they pass through, so that the lymph nodes can filter the lymph. All right. So what promotes lymph flow? Gravity can help. Putting your feet up can help move lymph. So lymph is going to flow this way because of gravity. Exercise. So remember, for veins, we had that skeletal muscle pump. There's the same idea here for lymphatic vessels. The squeezing action of muscles is going to push lymph through lymphatic vessels. Getting a massage would even help as well. So all good things to do. Exercise, massage, taking a nap. All of those things can help promote lymph flow. All right. On that note, what if lymph cannot flow? Well, we can get just a huge buildup of tissue fluid. So this is a little worm called a filarial worm, which is transmitted by a mosquito here. These worms like to set up shop in the lymphatic vessels in the upper leg, the thigh, the pelvis, and they can block lymph flow. And if we block lymph flow, we can get situations like this. This is called elephantiasis. And you can see elephantiasis. You can see just how huge the lower appendage becomes here. Okay, with that, we are done with lymphatic vessels and lymph and the return of that tissue fluid. What I want to do now is start talking about lymphatic cells and lymphatic organs and lymphatic tissues. So there's a variety of cells we're going to encounter when we're dealing with lymphatic organs and tissues, including reticular cells. Reticular cells make the reticular fibers. The word reticular has this idea of a network, and we see the way these fibers are connected here. These fibers make the scaffolding, like the internal framework of lymphatic organs, and that internal framework is known as the stroma. Now, present also within lymphatic tissues and organs are macrophages, which we know are the big eating cells. They kill foreign things. They activate the immune system. There are also dendritic cells, which are doing a similar job. They are killing foreign things and activating the immune system. So we'll see all three of these guys in lymphatic tissues and organs. And also, and entirely unsurprisingly, we'll see lymphocytes. T lymphocytes, which we know are going to kill infected and cancerous cells as well as control your immune system, plus B lymphocytes, which become plasma cells that secrete immune proteins, which are called antibodies. So those are some basic lymphatic cells we're going to encounter. Now, lymphatic structures that we're going to meet can be classified as either primary or secondary. primary lymphatic structures are places where lymphocytes are made and or where they mature. And there are two primary lymphatic structures, the red bone marrow and the thymus. Secondary lymphatic structures are going to house lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are going to, quote unquote, live there. And these are sites where the immune response is initiated. And this includes organs like lymph nodes, the spleen, the tonsils, as well as something called MALT. And MALT stands for mucosa associated lymphatic tissue. Mucosa associated lymphatic tissue. So we'll talk more about that and more about all of these guys, but just recognize the distinction between the primary and the secondary lymphatic structures. Okay, let's start with lymph nodes. We see a bunch of lymph nodes here. Lymph nodes are going to filter the lymph. Whoops. Just knocked off my own headset. Don't know how I managed to do that. Lymph nodes are going to filter the lymph. Afferent lymphatic vessels go into a lymph node. Efferent lymphatic vessels leave. So for example, if I look at, I don't know, this lymph node right here, okay? That lymph node right there. That lymph node has an afferent guy going into him right here. And it's got an efferent guy leaving him right here. So the afferent brings the lymph into the node. The efferent vessel takes the lymph out of the node. Now bear in mind, these are relative terms, right? So I just said that this guy right here is afferent to this lymph node, but notice it is also efferent to this lymph node right here. So this guy is afferent to him because he's going towards him, but he's efferent to him because he's coming out of him. All right, let's talk more about lymph nodes and their structure and what they do and their location. So three major locations of lymph nodes include the neck. So we have cervical lymph nodes there. The axilla, so we get axillary lymph nodes there, as well as the groin. So we've got inguinal lymph nodes there. Now there are lymph nodes throughout the whole body, but these are just three main superficial locations. And this totally makes sense, these locations, because cervical, we're filtering the lymph from the head, axillary from the arm, and inguinal from the leg. So it definitely makes nice logical sense, and we like it when it does that. All right, this is a lymph node, this kidney bean structure right here. Notice it has these afferent lymphatic vessels. It's got 6 of them. It's got one efferent coming out at an indentation called the hilum. Now, this fact that there are more afferents going in than efferents going out is significant, because what it does is it creates a bottleneck effect, which is going to slow down lymph flow. So the flow of lymph through the node is going to be slow, which is going to create time, which is going to allow the cells in here to filter the lymph. Now, a couple other structural features. There is a capsule of dense connective tissue surrounding it, and then the capsule has these inward extensions called trabeculae. We've seen trabeculae in multiple organs now that are going to compartmentalize and kind of separate the node into different regions. So capsule on the outside, and then trabeculae going in. All right. Now, the lymph flows in, and notice the valves in these lymphatic vessels, the just multiple valves here. As the lymph flows in, first the lymph ends up in what's called the subcapsular sinus. So first the lymph ends up in a subcapsular sinus. So the lymph ends up in a subcapsular sinus. Then it flows through the cortex of the lymph node through a cortical sinus and flowing past both diffuse lymphatic tissue, diffuse meaning the cells are spread out, as well as follicles. Follicles are where the lymphatic cells are clumped together. Let me see, do I have a picture here? Bear with me for a second, please. Do I have one? Yes, I do. So you see all the little circles here? The little circles are follicles. Anything around the circles would be diffuse lymphatic tissue, as well as the spaces would be sinuses. So as the lymph is flowing through the cortex, and by the way, the cortex is this outer region here. This outer region is the cortex. As always, as we flow through the cortical sinuses in the cortex, we flow past lymphatic cells that are spread out. That's called diffuse tissue. We flow past follicles. Those are lymphatic cells, primary lymphocytes that are just packed tightly together. The framework of the cortex is formed by reticular fibers, and we're going to see both B and T lymphocytes there. And this is a place where we meet and start our defense against foreign things, and that is called antigen challenge. That when we meet and start defending against a foreign thing, that can happen in our cortex of our lymph nodes, and that is known as antigen challenge. All right, the medulla of the lymph node is the deeper part here. The medulla also has sinuses, these spaces in here, as well as medullary cords, which are kind of like follicles, but not as round as the follicles, more like oblong, more string-like, hence the word cords. We'll also have diffuse tissue in the medulla. We'll have reticular fibers forming the stroma or the framework, as well as a lot of T lymphocytes. And this medulla is another site of antigen challenge. Okay. Now, if you want a good mnemonic device for lymph node flow, just ask me. Ask me is in fact our mnemonic device, because we're going to have afferent lymphatic vessels. They are going to lead to the subcapsular sinus right under the capsule, which then is going to lead to the cortical sinuses. And I'm not going to write the word sinuses, I'll just say it. And then the medullary sinuses, and then finally we're going to have the efferent vessels, leaving. So that is our basic pathway of lymphatic flow. Afferent vessel, subcapsular sinus, cortical sinus, medullary sinus, then out an efferent vessel. And bear in mind the lymph node gets blood flow as well. I got an artery and a vein going in and out at the hilum here. Of course, we got to do all of the normal things, that blood supply does. But then we've also got to provide new lymphocytes and shuttle lymphocytes around between different lymph nodes. And the blood helps me do that. All right, here's a lovely model of the lymph node. We can see an afferent vessel going in with some valves. We got efferent going out. We've got a capsule right here. We've got trabeculum. This is one trabeculum right here, another trabeculum right here. We got a cortex on the outside. We got a medulla on the inside. We're going to see the cords in the medulla, the follicles in the cortex, the diffuse lymphatic tissue, and the sinuses as well. If we look at the real thing, and the real thing is always so much better, I can really appreciate the abundance of lymphocytes here, especially in my cortex, because of all the purpleness. I can see follicles in here. I can see diffuse lymphatic tissue. I can see cortical sinuses. I can see my medulla in here with the many medullary sinuses and the medullary cords. I see my capsule on the outside as well. Some nice histology there, and I think we are done with the what? The lymph node. All right, we will call it quits for this lymphatic system lecture video number 1. I'll do a short video to finish this guy off. We'll do the thymus, the spleen, the tonsils, some lymphatic tissues as well. So, good stuff as always, and I will see you later.